Disclaimer. This is an audiobook recording performed for entertainment purposes through fair use. I do not claim any of the text being read to be mine or written by me. This is Twisted by Laurie Halse Anderson.
Warning. This story is not for children. It contains talks of abuse, violence, assault, both sexual and physical, drugs, alcohol, and suicidal ideation. Listener discretion is advised.
41. In order to convince Bethany that I was not a rude, disgusting pig, I spent homeroom apologizing 100,000 times for standing her up at the game. "It's okay," she said again. "Honest, I get it. You've seen my mother. I understand parents who freak out. Trust me." "Is that a new shirt?" "Yeah, I guess," I said, praying I had taken off all the tags. "My mom bought it." "I like it. But you know what, Tyler Miller?" She focused her eyes on me. The rest of the world was sucked into a giant vortex, leaving only the two of us. "You are too old to let your mommy buy your clothes." "I am? I am." "You should go shopping with me. I'll take care of you." "Oh, dear God, will you ever?" I was experiencing a noticeable lack of penis control. I slouched a little in my seat to hide the bulging evidence. She didn't notice. She turned around to ask Mikhail Roberts, sitting behind her, if he had done the chemistry homework. But she didn't offer to take him shopping. Ha! 42. Bethany flirted with me for the next 2 weeks. She also flirted with a soccer halfback named Stefan, Evan, who had a drum solo in the marching band, both of the Prakash brothers, and Parker, the moronic sophomore who I put through a gym locker. I figured the only thing she saw in Parker was the Corvette he was promised for his 16th birthday. Bethany was smart like that, always looking ahead. If you lined me up with the other guys, you'd start singing "One of These Things Is Not Like the Others" from Sesame Street. The other guys, they all blurred into each other. Rich, smart, athletic, and popular. Me, I stood out. The semi-bad boy guaranteed to bring some spice to her life. Of course, there was always the chance she was setting me up for major humiliation, or that this was all mercy flirting. But honestly, I didn't care. You could tell that Halloween was just around the corner when Christmas decorations went up at the mall. The weather finally turned cold, and all the girls started wearing turtlenecks that showed their belly buttons. Bethany owned a black cashmere turtleneck. It was a little longer than the other girls, but short enough to flash a quick hint of belly skin when she reached up to fix her hair. She was now touching me an average of 2.4 times a day. The other doctor gave her permission to play tennis again, and that was the day she first hugged me. Hug number 1. She hugged a bunch of other people too, including all her girlfriends on the team and zit-faced Parker, and both Prakash brothers, but she was enthusiastic like that. When I saw Mr. Benson at the courthouse that afternoon, he said I looked different. "You got a girl?" he asked. "Nah," I shook my head. "Nothing like a woman to clear up a man's spirit. Be safe. I'll see you next week." The night of the first hug, I dreamt about beating Chip Milbury into a bloody pulp. He got in a couple of good shots. I broke a tooth and my mouth was bleeding. My last punch sent him flying over a roof that we were standing on. We were so high in the air I didn't hear him land. Then Bethany was in my arms. She wasn't mad at all that I had just obliterated her brother. I put my fingers under her chin. My heart beat so fast I thought I was going to die. I moved in slowly and kissed her pink cupcake mouth. She kissed back, harder. I was thinking raw caveman thoughts. But this time it wasn't about beating a guy to death. I wanted a woman. I wanted this woman. I cradled the back of her head in my hands. A strand of her hair fell into my eyes. The universe was spinning, and this kiss was the only thing that mattered. Bethany opened her mouth. Her tongue glided over my broken teeth. The taste was like blood and frosting. And then I woke up. The dream was a sign, a magical intervention by all the saints and spirits in charge of helping dweeb guys desperate for girlfriends. Those signs and spirits, however, had nothing to do with decent grades, which was why the next day began with another calc quiz. But I completely forgot about it as soon as I was out the door because she was standing there, waiting for me. Almost swallowed my tongue. "Hey, Tyler," she said. I answered. I thought I'd come see you for a change. So, you going to the game tonight? 'Cause I am. And then, well, I'll be at Rawson's house. Josh Rawson? His parents are in Jamaica. It'll be a great party. I asked. She blinked, her eyes in slow motion. I racked my brain trying to come up with an intelligent thing to say. Something that would make sense. Anything to keep her standing close enough that I could keep smelling her perfume, because it was hitting my brain like crack cocaine. Oh, is what I finally came up with for the third time. You big dummy, she said with an exaggerated sigh. I want you. She put her hand on my left forearm and slid it up under my rolled sleeve. To go with me? She stepped so close I could feel the heat coming off her body. To a crazy Halloween party. I regurgitated my tongue and looked around at the crowded hall. You're not joking, are you? I mean, you know what I mean. You're not punking me, nobody's filming this or anything. No, silly, she said. Look, I like you. We're not going out, but I like you, okay? I want to spend some time with you. Are you getting the hint here? Her fingers curled around my biceps. Oh, yeah. While I struggled to remember a single word of my native language, the bell rang. Bethany pulled away from me. I shivered. You don't have to pick me up or anything. I'll be at the bonfire tonight. Then at the game. See you there? If your dad doesn't go off the deep end again, I mean. Yeah, she was already gone, her ponytail bouncing down the hall. 43. I was so desperate to make this night happen, I took the school bus home. The underclassmen stared at me like I had lost my mind. I nearly told them that I had a date with Bethany Milbury. I'll see you tonight, right? But that would have tempted fate, so I scowled at them instead. I made it to my house at 8 minutes to 3. I had about 4 hours before the bonfire started. Hannah had a game and Mom was shooting Labradors. Dad was the unpredictable one, so I would make the preemptive strike. The lawn hadn't been mowed since the night of the pork roast migraine, and it showed. In fact, our entire lawn looked trashy. It wasn't just the overgrown grass or the dying marigolds or the scraggly boxwood bushes. It was the gutters where rotting leaves had spilled into last year's broken Christmas lights, the paint flaking off the shutters and the mailbox that was tilted to the right. I couldn't fix all of that now. I just had to mow the lawn and sweep the cut grass off the sidewalk. I accomplished both in record time. After I showered, I wrote a note to Mom explaining that I was spending the night at Yoda's. The warrior tradition of holding a bonfire the night before the Halloween game used to be a big deal. They say you could see the smoke for miles and kids would party like crazy in the cornfields behind the school, that there were rivers of beer and occasional virgin sacrifices. Then the lawyers got involved. Now the whole thing was closely monitored by the fire department and police. The bonfire itself was almost big enough to cook a couple of burgers on. The cornfields had been plowed under and turned into McMansion developments. The Key Club sold cider and fresh donuts. The fear of litigation had turned a pagan rite of passage into a pathetic show of its former glory. Some of the kids were wearing Halloween costumes, but most of us had on winter jackets. It felt cold enough to snow. I opened a 12-pack of spearmint gum. A few teachers mingled in the crowd, friendly-like, standing close enough to students to smell their breath and stare in their eyes. I chewed stick after stick and tossed the silver gum wrappers in the fire. The lights went on in the stadium, and the marching band warmed up. The Key Clubs closed down the cider stand. Bethany and her friends finally arrived at the bonfire as it was dying down, and people were hustling from the parking lot to the stadium so they wouldn't miss kickoff. The girls were wearing matching Halloween costumes, a cross between an angel and a fairy, with black leggings, tiny skirts made of fabric leaves, low-cut skin-tight tops, and wings. A couple girls wore devil horns in their hair, which spoiled the effect. Not Bethany. Her white feathered wings fluttered as she walked. Her hair caught in the breeze and played around her head like magic. She looked like she could fly away to the stars if she wanted. "Tyler!" She danced ahead of the other angel fairies and ran up and put her arms through mine. Her arms sparkled in the firelight, and her cheeks were red. Oh my God, you wouldn't believe it. Stacy's mom's car got a flat tire, and we didn't know what to do, so then we called AAA, and Stacy called her stepdad, and some guy came out of his house, and he had the wheel off before anybody could say anything. And then they said we could go in his house, but we were like, whoa, strange guy, don't think so. And then AAA guy and the stepdad showed up, and anyways, that's why we're late. God, it's freezing. Did you miss me? Somehow my hand slipped behind her head. Somehow I bent my face down to her. Somehow her lips opened. Somehow I kissed her, and somehow she kissed back. The bonfire roared and reached for the sky.
44. Apparently, we lost the football game. I didn't notice. Bethany started shivering right after we sat down on the bleachers, so I took off her wings and put on my jacket. I was frozen within minutes, but it didn't matter. I kept her wings on my lap. I counted the freckles and sparkles on her cheeks. I bought her popcorn and hot chocolate. I did not lick the spot of hot chocolate off the corner of her mouth. I did not make passionate love to her on the bleachers. Thought about it, but didn't do it. When I bought my second round of hot chocolate, she confiscated my wallet and went through it, snorting at the picture on my student ID, cooing at the photos of Hannah when she was little, and arcing an eyebrow at the patient condom that had lived there for years. It wasn't like we were going out. Not exactly. Not officially. But we were at the stage where she gets to go through my wallet, and I had kissed her in front of police and armed with guns, and she had kissed me back instead of having me arrested. There was a chance that somehow this wasn't really happening. I didn't know how, but I wasn't going to question anything. The whistle blew. Game over. I walked to Stacy's car, just jam full of girls. In the middle of a crowded parking lot, Bethany kissed me again. It was a quick kiss, but it was A, public, and B, her initiative. 2 kisses in one night. I was on a roll. I mean, there was also a chance I was hospitalized in a deep coma and that this was an entire night that had been a hallucination. But so what? Stacy hit the horn. Bethany handed me my jacket and took her wings back. I'll see you at the party, right? Sorry we can't give you a ride, but there's no room. No problem, I said. No, wait, problem. Where is it again? She rolled her eyes. Rawson's house? You doof, don't you know? No. How do I get there? She grabbed a pen out of her purse and wrote down the directions on my palm. She blew it so that the ink would dry. My knees buckled. She giggled and gave me a quick kiss goodbye on the cheek. Don't be late, she whispered. 45. Okay. So maybe I should have admitted that I didn't have a car and that my father had confiscated my license when I was arrested for the foul deed, and that technically going to a party like this would be a massive violation of my probation. But that was the kind of stuff you had to build up to in a conversation. There wasn't time for that, not with Stacy blowing on the horn and cars squealing out of the parking lot. I figured it would only take me a half hour or so to get to the party on foot. Idiot, moron, cretin, fool. 2 hours and a couple of blisters later, I finally made it. Now, I've heard of Josh Rawson. Who hasn't? But never had classes with him, so I wasn't sure what to expect. Standing on his front porch, it was obvious that the place was crowded and noisy, but I didn't know the guy and wasn't exactly invited, not by him at least. So was I supposed to ring the bell or knock or sneak in the back? I rang the bell. Nobody answered. I pressed the button again. The door flew open, and I jumped back. 2 guys hustled the 3rd guy out as fast as they could. They made it to the driveway before he started ralphing. They yelled at him for getting splatter on their shoes. I walked in. Bacchanalia summed it up pretty nicely. A party that smelled of equal parts cologne, beer pukes, peppermint, and weed. Rawson had better pray his parents decided to relocate to Jamaica permanently, because this one was going down in the history books. The living room was on the right. That's where the speakers were set up. They had already blown a woofer, but kept the volume cranked so that the ragged edge of the sound made the walls shake. Girls were dancing with each other and boys were loving it.
either dancing behind them or snapping photos with their camera phones. I saw a couple of the fairy angel gang, their tiny leaf skirts flirting with the idea of being torn off, but no Bethany. On the other side of the entryway, there was a dining room, jammed with bodies packed around a table of overflowing bags of chips and pretzels, bowls of candy, and a carton of onion dip that had been used as an ashtray. On the other side of the steps led a sunken family room that contained mostly horizontal bodies. I hope she wasn't in there. The kegs were in the kitchen. Chip Milbury was too, with Parker and the other nitwits. They were starting to scowl in my direction when Bethany stepped out from behind them. "Tyler!" she squealed. "Tyler, Tyler, Tiger, Tyler!" My fairy angel stumbled toward me carrying 2 plastic cups sloshing with beer. Her wings were gone, and she was wearing a warrior sweatshirt that reached her knees and had a wet stain on the front. Her hair was tangled and tucked behind her ears, and she was grinning like a kid on Christmas morning. "You're late," she slurred. I got lost. "Having fun?" "Oh, yeah." She handed me a cup. Her eyes drifted toward her nose. "Drink," she commanded. "You need to catch up." I sipped and tried not to shudder. Cow piss. I set the cup on the counter. "Want to go outside?" I asked. "What?" "It's noisy," I shouted. The crowd around the keg chanted, "Chug, chug, chug," as a guy dressed as a pirate put his mouth on the tap and pulled the handle. I took her hand and motioned for her to follow me. My plan? What plan? I'm winging it. Parker moved quickly behind the crowd and cut off our exit. He stepped in front of me. "What are you doing with her?" he demanded. "Out of my way," I said. He put his hand on my chest. "Oh, crap. Now I have to shove him. And then he'll shove me back. And I'll trip and he'll jump on me. And people will scream and pour beer on us. And I won't get to kiss her." Bethany grabbed Parker by the thumb and twisted it painfully. "He's with me." She grabbed my hand and dragged me away. I grinned at Parker and winked. To be honest, I'd never been to a party like this. I mean, I'd been at parties and I'd done a little drinking, but this was off the hook and I was off balance. Bethany was totally at home. She wanted to dance. We danced. Well, she danced. Dirty danced. And everyone watched. I moved nervously from one foot to the other. Part of me wanted to keep part of me wanted to kill all the other guys in the room. Part of me wanted them alive, so that they'd have to deal with the fact that she was dancing with me. Me, Tyler, former loser Miller. She wanted to go down to the basement, so we went. She wanted to play pool, so we played. She wanted to watch some kid play on the PS2. We watched, with my hand on her hip and her hand in my back pocket. She wanted to drink, so I got her another beer, but I didn't get one for myself because out of the corner of my eye I was always seeing Chip and Parker. They were not happy with the way this night was turning out for me. When Bethany went to the bathroom with 2 of her girlfriends, I wandered back to the kitchen in search of real food. Yoda was pouring a cup of foam from the keg, and Hannah was wrapped around him like a blood-sucking leech. Yoda was at a party with my sister. My sister did not belong here. She belonged at home, in her bed, alone, asleep, with one arm around her Raggedy Ann and another under her pillow. My brain and hormones slammed into reverse, and I had to lean against the wall because the room was spinning. Hannah looked and pointed at me, her mouth hanging open in horror. "What are you doing here?" she shrieked. "What are you doing here?" I answered. "Hello, I was invited." "Liar." Yoda put his hands up. "Okay, you two, that's enough." "Shut up," Hannah and I both said. "Take her home," I told Yoda. "Get over yourself," Hannah said. "You're not going to ruin this for me." Guys?" Yoda asked. Can we just get along? It's a big party. Hannah chewed on her bottom lip. I won't tell if you don't tell. Deal. I don't know who you are tonight. Fine with me. I leaned closer to Yoda. Keep her out of trouble. Don't worry, Hannah butted in. We have other things planned. I'm going to pretend you did not just say that. Bethany snuck up from behind me and slid her cool hand into mine, pulling me away. The look on Hannah's face was totally worth it. We danced to 2 more songs, then my angel started drooping. When she led me upstairs, I suspected we were heading for the pearly gates. She opened the door. 46. I flicked on the lights. It was a little boy's room with Lego monsters and kid-side sports equipment and a Nerf basketball hoop. She turned the lights off. She sat on the bed and I sat next to her. So, I said. She leaned up against me with a sigh. Yeah? People downstairs broke into a round of applause. She rubbed her hand up and down my arm. I'm glad you came. You are? Yep. Chip's not glad. She turned and looked at me, her eyes dark and serious with the glow of the Harry Potter alarm clock. He thinks you're a loser. I get that a lot, I said with a smile. This was so funny it sent her to the floor with giggles. When I helped her up, she somehow landed half on the bed and half in my lap. Take me now, God, take me now while it's perfect. Did you know that you used to sound like a chipmunk? Hang on, God. I did? Oh, yeah. Remember Earth Science, 9th grade? We used to laugh about it all the time. You mean you used to laugh at me? Well, yeah, but that was back when you were a dork. She ran her finger along my jaw. You changed. I took her hand in mine, turned it over, and kissed the palm. I was breathing hard and hoping she didn't notice. I didn't change, I said. Did I? She snorted. Oh my God, you? You were like the quietest guy in our class, and boom, you just surprised everyone. Getting arrested? Yeah, that surprised me too. She snuggled. Yes, snuggled against my shoulder for a full 5 seconds. When I saw you at my parents' party, oh my God, what a big difference. But you're still sweet, right? That depends. Do you want me to be sweet? Yes, she said with a grin. She reached up and brushed the hair out of my eyes. Sweet and harmless, and she pushed me down on the bed and pinned me in the hottest lip lock of my life. Dangerous, she whispered. My brain stopped functioning. My hormones kicked into overdrive and grabbed the steering wheel. I was the Wolf Man, the Hulk, Casanova, the last guy on Earth, the last woman on Earth, ready and willing and very, very hot. Her lips were warm and sweet, and her breath was, well, if it was a little nasty, it didn't bother my heart on one bit. Her hand moved down my chest. Yes, yes! And she pressed herself against me, and suddenly my arms were around her, and the noise of the party faded away, and my hand traced the curve of her back, and I realized that under that leafy skirt she was wearing those tights, and under those tights absolutely nothing, and then, because I suck, my brain came back to life. And it started wrestling with my hormones. Brain. You do not want this. Hormones. Dude, this is exactly what I want. No, not like this. She's wasted. And your point? She won't remember any of this. And if she does, she'll be angry. Do you see where her hand is? God, that feels so good. Can't you feel that? She's drunk. You can't do this. It's wrong. I really want to do this. Really? You want to go to school and say that you scored with Bethany Milbury when she was so drunk she could barely say her name? I hate you. You're an asshole. She needs to eat something and drink some water. Don't let her drink any more beer. Yeah, I know. She'll love you for taking care of her. She'll love that you respected her. Just 5 more minutes. Just 5. Now. Can't believe we're making you do this. Yeah, I did it. I rolled away from her. Counted to 20. Then I counted to 50. I sat up carefully and rebuckled my belt. What's wrong? Bethany, sweet, wasted Bethany, muttered from her pillow. I want to see if they have any nachos. I love nachos, don't you? God, I can't believe you just made me say that. Shut the hell up. Don't you like me? I turned on the overhead light. You know I do. It's just... Come on, let's go. She squinted and held up her hand to shield her eyes from the light. You're walking out on me? No, it's not like that. It's just, look, Bethany, you're totaled. Shit-faced, no offense. You know, I really like you and I want to be with you, but someone please shoot me. Not like this. She blinked and shook her head a little as the words sunk in. You're blowing me off? She tried to stand up, lost her balance, and flopped back on the bed. I can't believe you're blowing me off. When I reached out to help her, she pulled away and pouted. What are you, too good for me? Gay? Don't like sex? It's not like that, I sighed. Not at all. You don't get it. Oh no, I totally get it. She stood up again, slower this time, lurching toward the door. You're weird. You know that, Tyler? I kind of liked you because you're different, but you're not different. You're just weird. She steadied the bottom of the door frame. Stupid freak. 47. I followed her down the stairs. I was worried about her tripping, but it wouldn't have mattered because she would have fallen into a pile of bodies. A couple 100 people had crammed inside. The party had turned into a tsunami of teenagers floating on noise, smoke, and beer. I lost her in the crowd. I could have stayed right behind her, I guess, but my stomach felt like she had stomped on it with combat boots, and my hormones were ready to rip my brain out of its skull. I should have followed her because she wasn't thinking straight. She looked innocent and vulnerable, and she didn't know what she was saying or doing. But I didn't. Yoda saw me wandering and had me follow him into the room where a bunch of guys were playing video games. I kept my eyes on the screen, but I wasn't really watching. He asked me what was wrong. I told him for a change. Wow, he said. Exactly, I said. Do you want to get drunk? He asked. Wouldn't help. He turned to the game. Half an hour later, some girl I didn't know asked me if I had seen Bethany, and I told her no. A few minutes after that, Hannah turned up. You need to talk to Bethany, she said. No way. She said you guys had a fight. She's really upset. Good. What are you talking about? Never mind. I'm not talking to her. You shouldn't either. Let her solve her own problems. The sound of breaking glass came from the living room, followed by angry voices. 2 bodies, fists flying, fell across the archway, bouncing, then hitting the floor. The crowd surged behind them, hollering and snapping photos. Yoda and I hustled Hannah out the side door. We should go home, Yoda said. Hannah frowned. It's just getting good. It's only going to get worse, I said. She looked back through the window, wincing as one of the guys landed a punch on a fragile nose. All right, she sighed. Are you coming with us? I looked inside. No Bethany in sight. I had no obligations. She had invited me, yes, but she blew me off. She could go home with her girlfriends or her brother. It was none of my business. She was none of my business. I'm going to stick around for a while, I said. Are you sure? Yeah, we're not telling Mom about any of this, right? Duh! Hannah gave me a quick peck on the cheek. Love you, Ty. Stay out of trouble. The power went out an hour later. Some guy started screaming like a madman, running through the house, telling everyone to get out. It was Josh Rawson. Yes, the party was at his house, and yes, his parents were in Jamaica. But Josh had been at a family dinner at his girlfriend's. That was him throwing a circuit breaker to cut off the electricity. And that was him hollering and punching his buddies in the head. When the lights turned back on, I searched all over until I found Bethany curled up on the floor of the rec room. I shook her awake and told her we had to leave. She looked at me with confused, sleepy eyes. My stomped-on stomach fluttered. We have to go, I said gently. They're kicking everybody out. Don't wanna, she pouted. She was beyond wasted. She was heading for incoherent. We don't have a choice. I helped Bethany to her feet. She mumbled something about her shoes, but I had a bad feeling about where the night was headed, so I basically dragged her onto the curb. Now what? Where's Stacy? I asked. Bethany, open your eyes. Where's Stacy? The girl you rode with? Her eyes fluttered. Left early. SAT prep. Great. We were 8 miles away from home, and she was barefoot, and even with my jacket over her sweatshirt, she was shivering. I could carry her, but eventually I'd collapse from exhaustion. She might be able to get enough warmth from my dying corpse until the early morning commuters saw her and called an ambulance. She'd cry at my funeral and keep a bunch of silk flowers and a cross at the spot where I had laid down my life for her. That would work. No, wait! She started toward the road. There's my brother. Chip! Chip! Chip was driving his Jeep along the white line on the road at 3 miles an hour. He coasted to a stop on the shoulder, and Bethany opened the door. I looked inside. Crap. Chip smiled at me, then passed out cold, his head on the steering wheel. Bethany didn't notice. She was already crawling into the back seat, where Parker's zit head was sitting, eyes unfocused. It wasn't a hard decision. I dragged Chip out, marched him around the car, and poured him into the passenger seat. I took the driver's seat. I buckled the seatbelt and turned the key. So the night hadn't turned out the way I'd planned. It had turned out better, because I was the stand-up guy, righteous. When she sobered up, Bethany would realize that. Even Chip would have to back off, because I pulled his nuts out of the fire by getting him and his Jeep home in one piece. The first mile went well. Then Chip started to moan, those deep, low guy moans that meant he was either in serious pain or about to, puke his guts out in the footwell. I rolled my window down, tried to breathe through my mouth. Chip moaned again, leaned forward, and passed out with his head on the dashboard. I glanced in the rearview mirror to see if Zithead was about to blow too. I hit the brakes. Bethany had crawled into Parker's lap. They were playing tonsil hockey, with her hands in his hair and his hands where I couldn't see them. Hey, I screamed. Leave her alone. I yanked the car to the side of the road and threw it into park. I spun it around in my seat and tried to peel Parker's arms off the body of my angel. Get your goddamn hands off her, you pig. They separated with a loud smack of their lips. What? Bethany slurred. Don't do this, okay? I asked. Just let me get you home. She gave me the finger, turned, and attacked Parker's face again. Parker chuckled. I pulled in the Milbury's driveway at 3:47 in the morning. I shut off the engine, got out, and threw the keys on the roof of the house. Chip was snoring, his chin against his chest, and his shirt was disgusting. Bethany and Parker were still at it. The back window was completely fogged up, They hadn't noticed that the car had stopped. I thought about getting in the car and driving into a concrete pillar at 90 miles an hour, but I had already thrown away the keys. 48. I existed on cruise control all weekend. Home, bed, sleep, shower, look at food, throw food away, bed again, stare at ceiling. Nothing worked. The short independent film, Bethany Milbury Hates Tyler Miller, was playing on constant loop in my head. I tried everything to drive it out. Watched MTV, did 1,000 jumping jacks, and then 1,000 sit-ups, listened to music as loud as the volume dial would let me. I even tried beating my head against the wall. It left a dent, but it didn't stop her voice mocking me, her fingers in his hair. I didn't bother with a jacket. If I was lucky, I'd catch pneumonia and die before winter. As I walked through the gates of Eternal Rest Cemetery, a flock of crows exploded out of a tree. It was just a matter of time before one of them dropped a depth charge on my head. I did not pull up the hood of my sweatshirt. The crows followed me up the hill. Grandpa Miller had been a traveling salesman, selling seeds and equipment to farmers. He got screwed out of a John Deere franchise back in 1965 and never got over it. He picked out a plot himself at the top of the hill. Grandma was not next to him. 40 years of marriage was bad enough, she'd said. She'd rather spend eternity alone. The crows called back and forth. The trees shivered. The wind was blowing a cold front across the graves, preparing us for winter. When the nursing home called Dad to tell him Grandpa had finally died a couple years ago, he hung up the phone and said, "Thank God." I sat on the damp ground next to his grave. His stone was white as bone and as hard as he was. It was so freaking pathetic that this was the only place I could think to visit. I cried like maybe it might help something. It didn't. 49. By Monday morning, I had almost convinced myself that A, it hadn't happened, or B, if it had happened, everyone was so drunk they wouldn't remember, or C, if they remembered, they'd be too embarrassed to talk about it. It's going to be great. Everything is fine. I'll say something clever or witty to show that she hadn't hurt me at all. No, that's not my heart's blood dripping on the floor. Bethany who? Yeah, she was hot for me, but I had to let her down gently. You know, she's not really my type. I cut homeroom. A hall monitor caught me hiding in the men's bathroom and wrote me up. In calc, we had a pop quiz, which we then got to trade with our neighbor for an instant jolt of public shame. I got a 37. I kicked a soccer ball a little too hard in gym. It nailed some guy in the stomach and he had to go to the nurse. I didn't do it on purpose, but the teacher still yelled at me. Viral rumors about the party were incubating in the halls. They said the gang fight broke out. They said that the house almost burned down. They said Bethany Milbury blew me off in a major way. They said I was one of the kids who went to the hospital with alcohol poisoning. They said Josh's parents were going to send him to military school. They said there was another party, a bigger one, coming this Saturday. My head hurt so much by the time English started, I had to keep it on my desk. Mr. Salvatore was not sympathetic. He was all fired up about a few papers that were turned in word for word identical. I tried to listen, but all I heard was plagiarism and academic integrity and cheating 50 million times. Nobody looked him in the eye. When he had worked himself up to a point where he looked like he might punch a whiteboard, he handed back our papers, announcing who had earned zeros because they cheated. I hadn't copied my essay, honest. It was comparing the themes of Paradise Lost to Crime and Punishment in the same exact 500 words. He stood over me, essay in hand. I had a 0 too. Time to start playing by college rules, Mr. Miller. You need to actually read the book before you pretend you know what it's about. I opened my mouth before my brain kicked into gear. In college, they don't care if you show up to class, so long as you pass the final. Do we get to play by that rule too? The class went quiet. Mr. Salvatore licked his lips. Are you asking for a detention, Mr. Miller? Choice. Say yes and pay for it, or no and look like a weenie. No. Have your parents sign your paper. And don't forge their signature, okay? Be a man. I waited until he launched into a discussion about the layers of meaning and punishment, and then I raised my hand and said I felt sick. When I walked to the nurse's office, the kid I hurt with the soccer ball, by accident, I swear, freaked out. A nurse gave me 2 Tums and a hall pass and made me leave. The bell rang. 11 o'clock, and I'd already gone 3 rounds with a heavyweight without a headgear. I cut lunch. I cut French, too. I didn't cut study hall. Not much of a point in that. Just sat next to the window and watched the wind stripping leaves off the trees. The attendance office called me down at the end of that period. I was hoping they'd punish me by chopping my head off in the courtyard. But no. I was instructed to serve detention for cutting my morning classes. I ran into Bethany as I came out of the office. No, literally. The bell had rung, the halls were packed, and I misjudged my entry into the flow of traffic. We smacked into each other right in front of the glass wall. She dropped her books, and I bent down to pick them up before registering what was going on. Oh, she said. Yeah. I handed the books to her. She turned her head away. Thanks. See ya. They were watching, the kids who fed the rumor mill. I should have walked away right then, right there. If we had been alone, maybe I would have. But they were watching. See ya. I was a train wreck with a runaway mouth. You, have a good time at the party? I called. She clutched her books tightly and walked down the hall. I followed. I mean, what was it that you loved the most? Was it drinking yourself blind or throwing yourself onto every guy there? She sped up, bumping into people at their lockers. How many guys did you bring upstairs, huh? My voice cracked. Bethany did a 180 in the middle of the hall and headed back in my direction. Leave me alone, she said loudly. That's not what you said Friday night. Leave me alone. People were openly staring, circling, taking bets. Chip Milbury peeled off from a group of guys coming from the stairwell by the office. He looked at me, at his sister, then back at me again. What's going on? Bethany ran over to him and said something under her breath. Chip glared at me. Where do you get off talking to my sister like that? Mr. Hughes stepped out of the office. The voices in the hall died down. Is there a problem here? This guy's harassing Bethany, Chip said. Mr. Hughes motioned to the crowd. Go on, everyone. That was the bell. Nothing happening here. Move along. You 3. Get to class, and we'll sort this out later. I caught a glimpse of Bethany's face just then. There were tears in her eyes. Real tears. Because I had hurt her. I had been a jerk. I was scum. She wiped the tears away with the palm of her hand and disappeared down the hall. 50. I went to hell right after dinner. Level 29 and rapidly descending. Like most games, Tophet was a test. You had to suffer through weeks of mind-numbing boredom in the early levels to get to the real deal. I was ready. Gormley had finally stolen enough of Mammon's fortune that he could buy the protection he needed to blast through the shields of Malak. If I kept this up, I'd blast through the battle with the Lord of Darkness within days. Hannah burst into my room. She shoved me off my keyboard and opened up a browser window. Hey, I said. I was about to napalm a horde of succubus. She concentrated on typing. Shut up and watch. She hit the enter key and stood back. The browser screen went black for a second. Then 3 small photos popped above the word slut. "What's that?" I asked. "Take a deep breath, Tyler." She clicked on the first photo and it enlarged. Bethany. My Bethany. The quality of the picture was poor, but it was definitely her face. It was Bethany on the bed, wearing that little leaf skirt from Halloween and a bra. That was all she was wearing. No tights, no sweatshirt, no wings. She was curled in a ball, her hair spread out across a pillow. Her eyes were closed. Hannah clicked the next photo. Almost the same pose, except the bra was missing. "Oh, God," I muttered. "Yeah," she said grimly, and clicked. I only looked for a second, but I'll never forget. It was her, and she was naked, turned on her side so that some things were covered by shadow. Her eyes were closed. A guy's hand was in the shot, reaching for her butt. "Who did this?" I asked. "I don't know," she said. "Call Yoda. He'll figure it out." "Why do you care?" she asked. "I thought she blew you off." "How do you know that?" "Dude, she told the whole world." I clicked on the browser window to close it. "How'd you find this?" "Somebody IM'd me the link." Hannah stood up. "Sucks to be her."